Previously on agentpalmer.com, no garbage in Dr. Space Junk's exploration of modern archaeology. Camp Cretaceous Season 2 is a wonderful expansion of the Jurassic Canon, and if you stayed until the end of the last episode, I can tell you Ed has plans afoot. This is the Palmer Files, episode 38, with Rebecca Seidel, an audio producer for Marvel who works on all stages of the audio production. We discuss being a professional audio producer, intellectual and creative inputs and outputs, playing the bass, share our audio origin stories, and much, much more. Are you ready? Let's do the show. Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershic, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 38th episode is Rebecca Seidel, who you may know from her work as an audio producer at Marvel, but perhaps you know her from some of her other audio projects, such as Other Men Need Help, Fucking Sober Podcast, Plague, Deliver Us, and my favorite, which is somewhere in the development cycle, but we talk about it, Abridged. Or maybe you know her as the New York City chapter leader of the podcast Brunch Club. We don't cover all of that in detail, but we do cover audio producing. So if you know Becca from any or none of those things, you're still about to get acquainted with her. The following conversation includes our respective audio origin stories, how being a bass player makes for being a good producer, cyclical hobbies, journaling, creative inputs and outputs, and quite a few other things as well. Before we get it going, remember that if you want to discuss this episode as you listen or afterwards, you can tweet me at Agent Palmer, the show at The Palmer Files, or Rebecca at BeccaHope24. That's BeccaHope 24. You can visit Rebecca Hope Seidel, that's Seidel, for links and updates to all of her projects. Don't forget you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com, and of course, email can be sent to the show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's get the tape rolling. Becca, I want to say you are a content audiophile, right? Like an audiophile is one who like gets in there and like collects vinyl as like the poster child, but you are a content version of that. Like you're just always in audio. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I've never heard it that way before, but I'm gonna borrow that now. I would say that's accurate. Yeah, I'm usually listening to stuff.
Where does it start for you? Like, was audio always the thing?
It wasn't always going, maybe in a certain sense, but I was always a reader and a writer first. And then I didn't really catch the audio bug until college when I became part of my college radio station and had a late night radio show. I was definitely a music person before that too. So There were like hints of it.
All right. So I will give you, in hindsight, where my audio comes from. Because like I've come full circle back to this. Like I went to a Jewish sleepaway summer camp and did the radio there, right?
Okay.
For like 2 summers, for 2 of those weeks, of the 2 of the 4 weeks, I was the morning DJ getting up at like 6 a.m. to do radio for and then in high school, I ran sound for plays. And then in college, I ran sound for plays and I did the radio station. And then it fell completely away. And I was just the writer until like I got into podcasting, period, like just listening and then guesting and then starting my own. And then it comes back and you're like, oh, but like it was all there, right?
I loved this all along, yeah.
I know how to run a board. I'm not afraid of a microphone.
Yeah.
Is it just, I mean, I know you talked about liking music. Did you play music?
Yeah, I think there were always seeds of it. Yeah, kind of to what you were saying. I grew up playing piano. And then in high school, I decided to be really cool and pick up the bass guitar. So it's always been
me too. Like I play a lot of acoustic right now, but like my first love is still the bass guitar. I don't think there's anything like it.
It's the best.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a really specific personality thing too. Like if you're into playing the bass.
Well, so it makes sense though, because like you want to be a part of it, but you don't want to be out front.
I don't want to be center stage, but I definitely want to be there and like in it.
That's the description of a good producer, right? Like I want to be there, but don't shine the light on me.
Right. Exactly. I have to ask too, just before we move on.
Yeah.
The Jewish sleepaway camp radio station, did it have Hebrew call letters?
No. Okay. I don't even remember what the call letters were. I'm trying to guess at what it would be, but I can't think of what it would have been. I mean, it was a Reform Jewish sleepaway camp, right? Gotcha. Like, so I mean,
there are tiers of these things. Yes.
We most of the songs we did for like the Friday night song session were in English. Like, yeah. We're yeah, that's me. I come and go with my spiritualism, but it's always fairly light.
Fair enough. Yeah.
So you have made a career in audio production.
Yeah. Somehow.
I've only started to think about a career in audio production because I enjoy what I'm doing, and I've obviously done some stuff for other shows before I started my own. It never occurred to me until like being unemployed for an entire year during a pandemic to be like, well, that's something I like, because you get that much time on your hands and you start to go like, well, what do I want to do? Like, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, but like,
given the full range of choices.
All right, let me ask you this. We're going to sidetrack for a moment. You are a writer, but you have the music and audio production, and obviously you're technically proficient on a level. If I took your current job away and said you can do anything, do you have a lot of options?
Gosh, that's a good question.
Because that's where I like personally, that's my biggest, like, I wish I had gone to school for like chemical engineering. That's one thing, right? Like, I could be a writer, a marketer, there's so many directions that like, it's not necessarily paralysis by analysis, but I go like, so many things.
Yeah. Like too many choices and yet somehow none.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to think so. This was sort of the quandary I had in college when I decided to be an English and creative writing major, which led me down the whole spiral of, well, where is that going to lead me? And the answer I told myself was anywhere, which has been pretty much true.
Yeah, I mean, I went to a small college and halfway through my sophomore year declared my major to be liberal arts so I could get an associate's. And then went, well, based on the classes and the writing and journalism stuff, I was like, I'll be a communications major to get the 4-year degree.
Yeah.
But you go like, well, you're like, what do I do now?
Where do you go from there? Yeah. Yeah.
Were you where did you go to school?
I went to Wesleyan.
So
up in Connecticut.
So you've stayed Northeast for the most part, New England.
Yeah, no, I'm born and raised in Queens. Went up to Wesleyan for college and then came back to Queens. So have not gone very far. I mean, you're not in a bubble, obviously. Like the audio production is I don't know, ubiquitous now. It's everywhere. Yeah, you can be anywhere. Yeah.
Do you find like a West Coast bias for that kind of stuff? Because to me, anytime I hear entertainment of any kind, I think of the left.
You think
coast.
West Coast?
Yeah,
that's interesting. I found that, at least for me, most of the opportunities I've gotten for audio and radio and podcasting have been in New York, which has been, I guess, very lucky for me. But I found a lot of community here, and I've never really felt a need to leave for better or worse?
Well, I'd say for better. I mean, it's nice to get comfortable. It's nice to put down roots. I mean, that's not. I mean,
yeah.
More often than not, we're gonna the depressing number, right? Like the average person is gonna have like 5 jobs before they retire.
Right.
I got really lucky that I had 2 for the first like a very long time, and then nothing. But you know, to be able to stay in one place is rare. Like most people have to move. And look, if you can do it from anywhere, and I think you can, right? Like we're getting to that point. I mean, I'm listening to bigger and bigger podcasters go remote because they had to, and immediately, and this is, you can tell me I'm a bad person, and that's fine. And I'm not going to name any names because I don't want to. But like, there are a couple big names that went remote, and I went, well, my episodes have always been remote,
right?
And
I've been doing this all along.
The first few, I was like, yeah, my quality's better. Like I don't know, I don't know what you're doing on your digital meeting, but like my quality's better. What do you're bigger than me. What are you doing? Like, does that make me a bad person?
No, not. I mean, I feel like it's been a huge learning curve, like, and I think a really good one, honestly, that so many audio producers have had to figure out how to make the best of it right now.
I just don't know how this doesn't become the norm, right? Like I can have my podcast. I can have any guest I want anywhere around the world as long as I can make the time work. And so if you want to do fiction and get any voice actor anywhere, even live, like
over a video call, but still remote, just with a good mic setup.
Shouldn't that make everything easier?
Yeah. I think the thing I miss as somebody who listens to way too many podcasts in my free time and also my work time, I do miss field tape. I miss hearing more just like on the street interviews, going into people's houses, kind of that texture and that kind of liveliness where everything's kind of a Zoom call now. It's only sometimes, like when I really think about it, I miss it. But so many shows don't, like, that's just not part of it. Like an interview show. Yeah. You don't need to be in somebody's house for that. So yeah, I think there are times when it could be nice to have a little bit more like movement on a show. But in general, I think it's been a really good, like, unfortunate timing, but lesson in recording remotely.
Yeah. You said you listen to a lot. I'm going to put you on the spot. Earbuds or headphones?
Oh, headphones. Over-ear headphones.
See, and you know what? I feel like this is a thing that's a producer thing. I'm the same way. Like
no earbuds. I can't do it. They fall out of my ears, which I don't know if that's a me problem or a producer. Just
I just always end up like I don't know. I just think the sound quality will never, like, everybody's like, oh, these are, they're good, but even a crappy pair of over the ear is going to be better than the average earbud.
I also tell myself that, like, I don't like the sound, like, just blasting directly into my ears like that, even though I'm probably going to lose my hearing early anyway, because I have headphones on all the time. But
well, so are you always listening to something? Like, do you I don't, like, I've actually stopped listening to podcasts because I've gotten back into listening to music, and you can only you can listen to both, but like, who are we kidding? Are you always listening? Do you, like, you're in sound, so like, are you like, I want nothing?
I kind of go in waves. It's a mood based thing for me. I find more often than not, I start basically every day listening to stuff. And more often than not, I'm listening to something, but there are definitely moments where I need to turn it off.
Do you still play music?
Not as much as I would like to. I did pick up my bass for the first time in a very long time a few weeks ago, and it was very dusty, which was very sad. And I just bought this, I'm gonna nerd out for a second, but I bought this MIDI keyboard on Craigslist, and I was super proud of myself because it's a really expensive keyboard, and I got it for like 1/6 of the price. and I lugged it home, just walking home down the street with this huge thing. And so I'm trying to get more into composition again. So
we're gonna get back to that in a second. I'm jealous of the fact that you can play the keyboard, piano, whatever. Like I can play a lot of instruments.
Mm-hmm.
I've never the keyboard or piano, like that's one I just cannot for some reason. And maybe I've never given it like a fair shot, but like drums, yeah, fine, guitar, bass, even saxophone, like yeah.
Saxophone is one I've always wanted to try.
I still have my tenor saxophone. I haven't played it in a very long time. I don't really want to either, though. Like, but I can't get rid of it. Like the sentimentality of it.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Do you still have your first bass?
I do. It's the one that I have sitting here in my room with me.
I don't have my first bass. I really wish I did, but I have the best bass. Which is I started out with a fake Fender P bass, like a cream white, no pick guard. It was beautiful, but it was heavy. Like super heavy, which is why I know it was fake. But then I got like an actual 5-string Fender J bass, and that's the one I still have.
Nice.
Which is
that's what you got to hold on to.
Yeah, that one. But I have too many instruments in this for like okay. So when I was a little kid, I skipped this in my like getting audio. Like I had a Porta Studio from Tascam. I actually had 2 of them. I had the 8-track and the 4-track, and I don't have them anymore. And I would, record my friends and stuff. And I always had the guitars around. I didn't have a mixer again until somebody sent me one when I started this podcast. And I know you do compose music. I can't get back into it. Like I don't, maybe it was just tough. A teenage whim. Yeah. Like I'm just going to write things.
Yeah.
I can't get back into it.
Do you think you don't have like the just drive to do it, or you really want to and it's just not happening?
I mean, I've made it an effort to play more often because I'm like, well, if I'm going to keep holding on to these instruments, I have to play them. Like for a very long time, it was just like, that's my collection of guitars collecting dust. Like, no, I'm playing now, but I think it's the lack of inspiration. So people have given me crap for not writing fiction anymore. Like I get my writing out, I scratch that itch with the blog. It's fun. And people give me crap for not writing fiction. Or specific friends will be like, how come you don't write any poetry anymore? I don't write poetry because I'm just not inspired to. And I feel like that's where fair. It is with music. Like I guess if I got inspired to write a song, I have no reason not to. I have all the implements.
You have all the, everything you need.
But it just kind of went away. I don't know. It's weird. Yeah. Are you finding things cyclical? Like you get back into things, or the ebbs and flows of life, I guess?
Yeah, I would say definitely. I guess sort of as an audio producer, I started thinking of things recently as inputs and outputs. Like, what am I inputting into my brain and what am I outputting creatively? And it's definitely from just staring at my Pro Tools screen too much that I'm thinking that way. But I do think sort of what I think about as my like main input and output kind of changes in a cyclical way. Like sometimes I'm in kind of a groove where I'm writing more. Sometimes it's composing. Sometimes, I do think it's a cyclical thing. And I don't know what causes it to shift like that. Like, I don't know what caused me to pick up my bass the other day for the first time in a very long time, for example.
Do you find it levels itself out? Like, are you, like, and obviously I'm not taking a week. Like, if we took a year, any given year, are you close to 50% for input and output? Or is it definitely not equal?
I'd like to think I'm close to 50%. I don't know. I would say if I'm thinking about a year, if I look back on a year, I always wish I had read more. And then, so like, I think I always wish I had had more input. But then again, I'm listening to podcasts all the time.
Yeah.
So that's,
yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, I mean, I've talked about it on this show before. Like, I turned myself into a reader, and I think it was it might be the one, like, quality of life improvement I'm most proud of.
No, that's so real.
And obviously it's opened some doors for me, like, intellectually, of like, I don't even read covers anymore, really. Like, you suggest a book to me, I'm like, all right, I'll read that. That's fine.
Yeah.
Like, okay. But I feel like I'm probably inputting much more than I'm outputting. Like, I still have a weekly blog, and this thing comes out every 2 weeks. And I mean, at least my books, I review every single one I read, because it's like I most of the things I read I want to share with people, but I'm still listening to podcasts and watching television I'm not writing about, and movies, and I feel like I'm definitely, like, net positive on input.
On input.
I don't know. I guess I would figure out, like, what would tip the scale? Like, how would I get my output to be more?
Right. Yeah, it hits a point where it's like, is that even healthy to think about it that way, you know? Because I think it's interesting that you review everything you read. I just think reviewing in general is an interesting topic. I have a lot of friends who, do you know Letterboxd?
Yes.
The, like, movie review site. I have a lot of friends who review every movie they watched on Letterboxd. And I just can't get my brain into that mode where I'm thinking as I'm watching everything what I have to say about it.
Oh, no. Well,
you know?
Okay, so I have two different approaches.
Yeah.
There's visual, and then there's the book. Okay, so for a book, I'm OCD with my books. I don't crack spines. I don't highlight. I don't write in them. I don't mark pages. What I do is I make notes by, like, pulling out my phone. Page 59, top paragraph, when he was a child. And then I'll know when I'm done,
you'll know what you were talking about.
And what I do is, when I finish reading a book, I'll go back through all my notes and I'll type them out. So I'll put the book open. I'll go to page 59. When I was a child, I put away childish things. That's the quote. I wrote it down, whatever. And then in the exercise of typing out my notes, so I have them without having to go back through the book, I get a better idea of what I want to say about this book. That's how I do books, right?
Yeah.
Movies, it's always 2 watches. Unless it's like a Marvel movie coming out in theaters, or any theater movie. Although outside of Star Wars and Marvel, I haven't really done much. But, like, you only get one shot, so you try and, like, and I'm writing spoiler free anyway, so it's not like I'm giving away details. I don't want to give away details. I just want to be like, this is great. This is why you should watch it too.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
And so, like, I just think about all the conversations I end up inevitably having with friends about the movie, especially the ones with friends who haven't seen it yet, right? So, like, Becca, I know you haven't seen this movie, but, like, this is why you need to see it. I just internalize that and turn it into a blog post. But for older movies, because I used to, and I want to get back to it, I used to do a lot of, like, 60s and 70s and even 80s movies that, like, or classics. Those always to watch. One, what am I, enjoying about this? And the next is like, all right, take some notes, this, that, and the other. But what my biggest issue is for reviewing is especially for older things, I need to find an angle. One of my favorite movies of all time is Real Genius. I did the 2 watch thing, right? Like, I watched it and I watch it all the time, but I watched it for the sake of, like, watching it. Then I watched it again for taking notes. I took my notes, and I didn't have an angle. And I still don't. I literally watched that movie like 4 years ago to write about on the blog. And I still don't have an angle on, like, what does it mean to me? What is it?
Like, general positive feelings, but what do I say?
Yeah. So it's not always easy, but those are my 2 different processes for reviewing.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I also like the idea. maybe it's the type of friends I have, but like I'm always talking about these things anyway.
Right. It's just kind of part of your friendships and your conversations.
Yeah. So like, and most of them don't even want to hear about the books, which is why I write about it to try and get it out of my system.
Get it out that way. Yeah.
Like I'm the only avid reader in almost all of my circles, with the exception of my parents. And that's taken a turn because my father and I overlap in a bunch of areas of interest. So we've been trading books. He retired a couple years ago, and we've actually been trading books back and forth.
Oh, that's so cool.
It's great. Like, this is
that's awesome,
such a new avenue because he was such a workaholic that it's like, oh, this is great.
That's amazing. And what a great like thing to talk about with him, probably.
Well, and it's great because like he's like, well, I have some books for you. It's like, oh, well, all right, well, I'll just put them on the list, right? Like, the pile.
Right.
Which I'm really trying to get to a point where I'm reading, where I've read everything in my house. I want to be that guy. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, and I've got a lot of, I've collected a lot. I think a lot, you can't be a reader or a music person and not collect things. Like I still have my CD collection. It may be in binders now, but
Yeah, it exists.
But like, I'm sure I've listened to every CD I've got.
Mm-hmm.
Why haven't I read every book? Why, like, how did I get to a point where I have so many more books than I've read?
Right. I'm sure it's pretty daunting.
I mean, I'm up for the challenge.
Yeah, right.
or I'd like to think I am. Are like, you want to get back into reading, and I'm going to take time out of it for a moment, because obviously that's the biggest obstacle in any of this stuff. Right. But what would you want to read?
Oh man, I have a long list of, whenever somebody mentions a book to me, it seems kind of similar to what you have. You have a long list of books kind of in your queue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a list somewhere. It's not really genre specific. Recently I thought I was like, memoir type things have always been really interesting to me. Personal narrative, nonfiction, like literary nonfiction has always been really up my alley. But lately I've been leaning more towards fiction, like things to escape. I think is a pretty common thing for a lot of people.
Yep, that's pretty fair. Yeah.
I just finished a fantasy book, and I haven't read fantasy in like a very long time, and it was such a nice escape. Like, I came out of it, I was like, oh, I actually like went somewhere else for a little bit. So I think my list for the coming year and just getting back into being a more voracious reader in general, it's kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah, I've done nonfiction, fiction, biography, and I kind of, I make sure I jump around because I want to escape, but I also want, this is, I don't know what this is. And if there's a psychologist out there listening, feel free to tell me what this means. But like, I always feel like it's mental gymnastics to jump around, and I want to do that. Mm-hmm. So I never read two of the same book back to back. So that way my mind has to change.
Yeah.
I don't
know if there's a word for that, but I think I do that. I think I have an instinct to do that with books, and then I do that with podcasts too. Like, I don't know if I do this consciously, but I'm jumping around between like a straight news show, kind of an interview style show, and then like the spacey, sound rich stuff that I love. I kind of do it all in doses. Okay. And I don't know what causes me to like go from one to the other, but it has to be all of them, Yeah, no, and I also feel like I learned my lesson once. I read the same author, the same type of book back to back, and I got halfway through the second one and went, did that happen in the book I just read or in this one? It's all blending together.
And I was like, all right, nope, we're not doing this again.
Yeah. Lesson learned.
Yeah. I have to ask this question. Mm-hmm. You've done some work for Marvel.
Yes.
when people find out you've done work for Marvel, what's the first thing they ask you?
Let me think about that. Well, sometimes it's who have you met, you know? Like who's come in the door.
Okay.
What's the office like? You know, I mean, I don't know. I feel like some of the, like a bigger name place has some like an air of mystery to it, where it's like, what's it actually like on the inside? Yeah.
Are they? I mean, I guess one of the reasons I ask is 'cause are people ever like, okay, you work for Marvel, or you've done work with Marvel or for Marvel, like no matter what it is, it always feels like unless you're actually Robert Downey Jr., right? Like everybody, it feels like everybody wants to know something else. They don't want to know about you anymore. And I've talked to other people, and I get that sense that Marvel, Star Wars, you know, it could even be like something is like NPR. I feel like at a certain level, people just want to know about the bigger thing, and you're just a cog in the machine,
right? Yeah,
but it's a feather in your cap, right? Like
it is a very it is a strange thing. Back in the day when, you know, we were all out in the world more and meeting people in real life just day to day, it's sort of a weird thing to drop in conversation where I start, you know, somebody says, what do you do for a living? I say, I make podcasts. They're like, oh, that's super cool. I didn't know that was a job. And then they say, where for? And I say Marvel. And they're like, like Marvel, you know what they always say? They always say, like the comics, like that Marvel. And I'm like, yeah, not the other one. Like
the other, yeah.
Yeah, so it's sort of, it always like derails the conversation a little bit. I will say that, you know.
But you give everybody the opportunity to not go there. I do podcasts. Like you keep it general.
Yeah. Well, it also just sounds a little bit like obnoxious is not the right word, but I feel like it's a lot to throw in at once. To be like, what do you do? I make podcasts for Marvel. Like I just haven't gotten like it's a little bit of a mouthful.
I don't know if that's true. Yeah. I feel like that's just. I mean, have you varied it up? Like, do you say like audio producer, and then people still say, "Well, what's that?" Like,
yeah, I think I do mix it up sometimes. Yeah, I kind of cater it to my audience too. You know, like,
that's
some
smart.
People don't really know what a podcast is.
Come on.
Thing.
Now, like now.
That's a generational. I mean, maybe not that they don't know, but they kind of like don't maybe know how that could be a job, which I guess is kind of understandable.
I mean, I have trouble getting. I mean, my mother begrudgingly listens to this show, and when I tell her that, like, oh, you know, I'm one of those sticklers for quality. Like, my sound, I'm gonna spend way too much time making sure it sounds good. I'm going to edit the hell out of it, and I'm going to make sure it comes in under my personal nothing over 75 minutes. Yeah. And I was like, so Mom, you should be fine. It's only 70. Like, it's not a 2 or 3 hour
not
show.
A huge commitment. Yeah.
And she's like, to her, this is a long episode.
Yeah.
It's not.
I mean, there are like 3 hour long radio shows, but I guess you kind of tune in and out of that.
Yeah, probably. Although I'd say people do that for podcasting too. Like when I was in my heyday of listening to podcasts, there
are some long ones.
There are some long ones, and I would listen while doing other things. So like you do come in and out of the conversation.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
But that's all audio, and I don't mean to put it down, but like that's music is the same thing. Like I'll listen to the same album for a long time and just be like, wait, what? How did we get on track 8?
Yeah, how did we get here? Well, that's one thing I love about audio is you kind of like, you can lose yourself in it, and you can also kind of tune it out and be doing other things, depending on what it is, of course. But I kind of like the fact that you can walk away from it.
Yeah. So I would love to say like Marvel movies are the reason I have one final question at the end of my episode after the closing music, but it's not. It's because I'm a child of the 90s. Well, the 80s, but it's because I was a CD guy. And
Yeah.
I
You have that
expected
bonus track.
that there were 30 tracks on this CD, and and the album track listing only lists 8, and then there's
Right.
21 blank
Surprise.
5-second things, and then you get to the bonus. And I just that's one of the reasons I did it, because like, yeah, my music might start playing, my actual outro, but there's 5 more minutes left on the podcast. It's not all music.
Yeah. Gotta stay tuned in.
I'd like to think people have gotten wise to it by now, but I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
Do you want to do your own show? Like, personally, you've got control over everything. It's all you.
Yeah. Yeah, people have asked me this before, because I have over the years, worked on a lot of people's shows, but never my own, besides my radio show in college. I have some projects on the back burner that are mine, and I like the idea of being the voice of them. It's not like a burning desire of mine to have my own show where like my voice is the core voice, but I definitely, like, as I get back into music composition and just getting back in the practice of recording myself more and talking on mic more and all of this stuff, it is something that I really, one thing I'm thinking about doing, and I was thinking about this way earlier on in the pandemic times, and it's kind of coming back to me now, is just having my own feed, my own RSS feed that I could just throw stuff in.
Okay.
Without the pressure of it being a regularly released show or a specific format. Just a place to kind of like be creative and just put it somewhere without pressure, but also kind of with the pressure because it's there.
Well, I mean, I started and stopped like 15 different things that all try and come out at once, right? Like, I feel like there is a part of me that's the Nike, just do it, like, because obviously, you don't know what works until you do it,
right?
But a little bit of accountability goes a long way. Like, I mean, I treat this show professionally because I want it to be taken that way.
Sure.
And I write that way on the blog, but there's a little extra crunch time when you go like, okay, well,
it's another,
what happens in 2 weeks? Like, and granted, I'm not weekly because I'm not crazy.
You're
like,
not gonna,
I'm
a kill over.
I'm too detail oriented to be able to put one of these. I mean, I could do one of these in that, but I'd never have any other things.
That would be all you were doing. Yeah.
But the pressure, right? Like just that little, like, 2 weeks, let's go.
Yep.
Come on. So
that's super fair. Yeah.
I feel like when you do create that feed for whatever it is, like that little, and you know what? You don't have to tell people it's every 2 weeks. You don't even have to tell people it's once a month. But the moment you hit publish, like that little voice in your head's going to be like, so
where's
what's
the next one? Yeah. No, I think that's true. And I think like just a little bit of internal, like putting a clock on it. Like if I just make an RSS feed tomorrow and it's there, I'll be like, great, I have an RSS feed. And then I can see myself not doing anything with it for a very long time.
Well, you don't create the RSS feed until you have the first thing, right?
Right. Like, you got to put something in there. Yeah. So I guess there would be that. But no, I think you're right that like putting a time crunch, whether it's, even if it's just on yourself, even if you're not accountable to an audience yet, is a good thing to do.
I still wonder how accountable I am to my audience because I'm trying to do things that are entertaining to me. Like I hope people come along for the ride, but like my guest list is so varied, and so eclectic and so out there that I find it absolutely implausible that even my most fervent listeners are like, yeah, I love listening to everything he does. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. You're switching it up a lot. Like, there's no way everybody's going to like everything.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
Although I do suggest everybody does, because my example
Mm-hmm.
is always like Marin. I've learned so much more from the guests he has on that I do not know than the ones who are like, yeah, I watched their movie. That's great. Like,
right.
Who is this guy?
Yeah.
No, they always
Those
have
are the most
great...
surprising ones. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Totally.
We've talked about all this writing. When was the last time you did some writing?
Oh gosh. That's the hot seat question. Way too long ago. I mean, well, okay. I had a journal that I kept, and it's one of those, moleskin notebooks that's kind of like a standard sized one. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I had the same journal for such a long time, it's embarrassing. And I finally finished it on the last day of 2020.
Okay.
And I started a new one, and I've committed myself to writing every day in it.
Okay.
And there have been days, and we're not that far into 2021. There have been days where I've written a sentence and been like, that is it. It's a sentence. It's my day. But I feel better about it than if I had not.
Well, I will tell you that from the age of 12 to the age of 20, 19, 18, something like there, those 5 or 6 years, I think I started 7 journals and I never got further than a week. With one exception, I never got, and my one exception is I spent 4 months in Israel and I documented every second in a total of 4 of the marble composition notebooks. That was the one time I did it. For some reason, I haven't thought my life has ever been that interesting since, because I've not even come close to getting that. And I think in hindsight, looking back, I think I got lost in my own narrative there.
Sure. Yeah.
Which is exciting to do, especially when it's 4 months. And I think maybe that's the key. Like, if I started one today, I'm just journaling.
Kind of like, when does it end? Yeah. It's like you're chronicling a specific experience versus just like your day-to-day life.
Yeah. And I know I don't write that much. Like we talked earlier about, like, I don't write fiction like I used to, but I don't quite write like I used to either.
Yeah.
Like, I've got other outlets, and I feel like you do too. Like, if you're picking up your bass again, like if you're messing around on the keyboard, like inputs, outputs, like if it's coming out, it doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah. Like, that's how I've been trying to think about it. Like if inspiration strikes and I find myself wanting to write a long thing, like I'm going to try to push myself to do that. But if there are other outputs going on, I feel less, or I'm trying to feel less pressure.
I love the idea now in my head of like 2 weeks from now, you spend like, you come home, you're done with work, you spend like 3 hours on playing the keys, and then you look at your journal and you go, I played the keyboard for 3 hours tonight. Done. Like,
done.
I've already done my output. I'm just noting it to keep it going.
Right. I love that. Yeah, I think that's, if that's my day, that sounds like a great day to me.
What creatively, and I this is a broad one of those super what's the word, blue sky questions, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not talking just, maybe it is doing your own show, but generally speaking, like creatively, what's like the pipe dream? What have you not done that you want your name like produced by, or written by, or edited by, or whatever it is? Like, what's the one or two? You don't have to be, but like, what's the medium? What's the plan? Because I'm sure, you go there on occasion, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I haven't fixated too much on the one dream, just because I think if I did, I would drive myself a little nuts every day that I didn't do it,
Okay.
But definitely the more I sink into the medium of audio, the more I want to stay there in some form. And I've had sort of a project that's been kind of alternately on the front burner and the back burner for a while now. And I like haven't quite cracked the final shape it's going to take. But it's an audio series all about bridges.
Okay.
So, and I have a website for it and everything. I probably shouldn't. I don't know. It's called Abridged.
I love it already.
And it's basically a series. Well, see it doesn't even have a final form yet, but the idea of it in my head is a series of audio pieces about different bridges in various kind of ways of thinking about them.
Sure.
Whether it's physical, metaphorical.
Okay.
Like a historical look at even the construction of a bridge, or talking to somebody whose like whole life revolves around a bridge for some reason. I think growing up in Queens, New York, where I live, there's a lot of bridges nearby, and I live near a park that has two kind of major bridges, and I just look at them and I think those things are awesome. And they're just like, they're kind of like this weird in-between place where you don't really spend a lot of time on them, but they do get you from one place to another, and I think that's really interesting.
So I will say I had a 6-month photographic dalliance with water towers. I could not.
Interesting.
I just fell in love with the idea.
You get a fixation
of seeing a water tower and being like, I'm taking a picture of that.
Yeah,
like, I don't.
This is what I'm talking about.
And you know what? I don't necessarily have a connection with any of them. One or two were like near where I lived, but otherwise it would be like I'd be driving and be like, all right, I'm gonna take a 5-minute detour and see if I can go over and get a good picture. I get it, and I'm on board for it. I guess my question is, for however long it's gone on, and I ask this from a process perspective, is it easy to jump back? Like if it's gone from front and back burner multiple times, is it easy to jump back in?
Not really.
Okay.
I had a summer where I kind of really focused on it and soliciting stories from people, doing research, reading books, and kind of really diving into it. And then various other projects took me away. And then, it was kind of hard to get back in. I think the ideal scenario would be having, like, if I had, like, 3 months where it was my thing and I was focusing on it, I could get somewhere with it.
And then once you get it moving, it should be a little bit easier to get going.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I hear that. I've got projects that, like, I was hot and heavy with and didn't finish.
Right.
And it's like, I want to...
Yeah. And again, like, I don't even know if it's necessarily, like, I wouldn't even necessarily call that my pie in the sky project or, like, my blue sky. Like, that's ultimately what I want to do. But it's just something that's been in my brain for so long that I just, like, really want to see it through.
Sometimes it's just figuring out, like, getting that done and then seeing what's next.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I don't... I've got so many open-ended things right now. Like, the blog is the blog. The podcast is the podcast. Like,
those feel pretty concrete.
They do feel pretty concrete, but, like, I still have this little voice in my head that's like, well, what else is there? And
right.
I don't need other people to be like,
right, come
on, do something else. Like I'm my own worst enemy. Like, it's just like, no, you're not.
No,
done
I'm
yet.
the same way. I'm always like, what's the next thing or what's the additional thing? And I'm somebody who bounces around between a lot of projects, and yet somehow it still feels like, oh, there's something I'm not doing that I should be doing.
I feel like that's my constant state.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you should be doing something right now. Like,
yeah.
I don't know what it is. And I've become a compulsive list taker. And I've started to try and write down more things. The amount of times I jump out of the shower to write something down now, I'm sure I've lost a ton of great ideas just because I've forgotten them by the time.
Yeah.
And what's odd is it's not always something I can control.
Mm-hmm.
So when my mind wanders, and sometimes it's in the shower, sometimes it's when I'm driving, I will sometimes think of the perfect opening question for a guest on this podcast.
Yeah.
And in my head, I will hear the whole podcast. I will
Yeah.
know what your answer is. Like, I will presume to know, and then what my follow-up is and what your follow-up is. And I will go through, like, and then by the time I get to wherever I'm going or I'm done with whatever I'm doing, I've completely forgotten not only the opening question, but all of the follow-ups as well.
But the whole,
all gone. So there are
damn,
podcasts.
I wasn't recording that.
there are podcasts I have done mentally that were brilliant. Just take my word for it.
I think I do that in my sleep sometimes. Especially when I'm like really deep in a project. Like I'll wake up and be like, did I just like edit that in my brain, in my sleep? That's probably not healthy.
Yeah. I've been there. Like, did I write that?
What? Right. Or did I just like somewhere? Yeah.
How's your recollection on the stuff you've created?
It varies. You know, it's so weird. Like, because you're somebody who's also like, it seems like a very meticulous editor and meticulous sound person. You listen to things over and over again. Like, I've worked on episodes of things where I basically have an hour-long thing memorized by the end of it. And then I'm a little bit sick of it. But then it somehow leaves my brain. It kind of trickles out. I would say my recollection is like in the past 6 months, I like have a pretty good recollection of things I've made. And then beyond that, it gets a little hazier. Like I know I made the thing, but I couldn't like tell you specific details.
I am constantly amazed. Like I think often I'll write a book review and an author will pull a quote to like retweet it. And I'll be like, who wrote that?
I said that.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's a great sentence.
I don't understand how I have this ability because it's not necessarily right that I've forgotten I wrote it. It's that's a really good line. Who wrote that? Not maybe that's mine. No. It's, that's a really good line. Who wrote that? Like, oh, it was me. Oh, okay. All right. Like I don't. For all I've done, I still don't have a lot of self-confidence in myself. I don't know where that isn't that supposed to build up over time, like the 30,000 hours or whatever it is. Like, aren't you supposed to? I wish
I knew. Yeah, I'm the same way.
All right, So, before I let you go, do you have any tips if I decide to become an audio producer? Like,
I mean, I think you're doing that right now.
Like, do people ask you, like, how do you get into it?
Yeah, people do ask me that. And my answer is usually find the community of people who A, want to listen to the things that you're making, and B, are there to support you along the way. I've been very lucky in my audio career to meet fellow audio people, you know, whether it's through, you know, various meetups at podcast events back when that was a thing, or listservs, or just general communities where people are gathering. I run the New York City chapter of something called Podcast Brunch Club, which is basically a listening community that has chapters all over the world, and every month there's a new theme with several podcast episodes that fit the theme, and then it's like a book club basically, and we gather to talk about it. And I met a lot of fellow audio people, listeners and producers through that. So just tapping into those communities has been huge, just for meeting fellow podcast people, collaborators and listeners. So that's been huge. And then just like really taking the time to get into the software and just like be really nitty gritty with editing and sound design and just having fun with it.
Have you ever been in a book club? Or is the podcast brunch club the club? Like, is that your book club?
That's basically my book club. I've been in and out of book reading communities. I was for a little while. A friend of mine here in New York had a kind of urbanism, like books about the city and city life book club. That was interesting. Read a lot of interesting things that way. But yeah, the podcast Brunch Club has been my biggest book club type thing that I've ever been into.
Is that
part of?
Is that why your listening is so varied? Because obviously that's changing monthly and.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. I will say, for podcast Brunch Club, often I find myself cramming when it's almost time to meet up, and I'm listening to the podcast at 2 times speed, trying to get through them because I have left it to the last minute.
So that's all I know about book clubs, period.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never been in one, but everybody I talked to who's ever been in was like, yeah, I gotta, we're meeting up tomorrow. I gotta read half a book. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What? Why are you in this club then?
Right. That sounds like too much pain.
And all right, so I've kind of cut back on listening to podcasts. The amount. I mean, I was listening to like 15, 20 different shows at one point.
Yeah.
Does podcast Brunch Club make it harder for you? Like, because obviously you're being opened up and introduced to all these different shows all the time. I mean, I'm sure there's some repeats, but do you find yourself being like, oh no, I'm subscribed to like more shows than I have time in the week?
Yes. Which is why I kind of jump between a lot of things. I sort of have my regulars that are kind of, I don't miss an episode. And then I have shows where if I'm in the mood, I know that they're there. And then sometimes there's the occasional just fun discovery. And those are the things I find through the Brunch Club occasionally, where I just like had no idea it existed. And then there it is. I can't do, like, I thought about joining. It's too much. Plus I mean, once I started my own show, I spent too much time editing. You can't listen to anything else when you're editing. Oh my God. I don't know how I do it. Like, I wake up, I put on a podcast while I listen to when I'm making breakfast. Then I like go to my desk and I'm editing audio. And then I like take a break and I'm, listening to music. And then later I'm listening to another podcast on a walk to the store. And it's kind of constant. And and back when I was commuting, I was doing that tenfold.
Sure.
Constantly just listening on my way to work and back. And knock on wood, I haven't gotten sick of it yet. Maybe it's that I don't want to hear the voices in my own head, so I just listen to other voices all the time. I mean,
that would explain a lot. I mean, I think that's probably why I switched to music and cut down on some of the podcasts, because I can definitely let the music kind of clear it out a little bit more than I mean, all right, so how about this? For the next week, you can listen to whatever you want, but it's got to be music or a podcast. You have to choose one. And
just stick to one?
For the whole week.
Huh. Oh, man. I don't know if I can.
I mean, you still have to listen to what you work.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not, if you work on a podcast, that's different. But, like, for pleasure, it's just music or a podcast.
Are you asking me to choose now?
Yeah. No, yeah. Let's do it.
Gosh. I think for the sake of just my mental state, I would have to say music.
Okay.
Nah.
Are you trying to come up with a music podcast so you can cheat? Is that
right? Only music podcasts that play full albums. No, I take it back. I would choose podcasts. Because
really?
Then the next week,
okay,
it would be such a relief to be like, oh, I don't have to listen to voices anymore. Like, there'd be something really cool about that. I also just find, like, I don't know, listening to so many podcasts it just feeds my brain in a way that I haven't found that other things do as much.
Do you? I can't believe it took me this long to ask. Do you do audiobooks?
No, not. I've tried, and I haven't tried that much. The last time I really listened, I was a really avid audiobook person, was back when I was a kid and had Harry Potter on cassette, and it would go. Jim Dale was the narrator, and his voice would get slower and slower as the battery ran out. That was my last audiobook experience.
Because I know in pitching, and and it's generational, but I know in pitching some people podcasts, you go, well, it's just like an audiobook.
Right.
I mean, not this show, but like other shows. Be like, it's just like
some, yeah. No. I just feel like at that point, maybe because I'm so used to producing podcasts and putting all the bells and whistles on it, that listening to an audiobook is a very strange experience for me. And at that point, I would rather do something else with my eyes and read.
Well, I talked about reading being the one big thing, but not staring at a screen. All of my books are physical because that's the 30 minutes to an hour every day. I'm not staring at a screen.
Right.
And
it's
that's
a really necessary
important.
Escape. Yeah. Definitely.
We need to give our eyes a break. Plus, I mean, I use Audacity for everything because it's a program I've grown up with and I've been using it for 2 decades now, on and off. So.
And you edit with it too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've just I had a chance and played around in Audition. And I know Photoshop. So what this is how it works. I know Photoshop. I know Illustrator. Okay, I should be able to.
Yeah.
And I know Audacity, so I know how audio works, how to edit it, and I know how Adobe works. And I just couldn't put it together.
Yeah. Once you have your brain wrapped around one thing, I struggle with this a lot because for my work, like at Marvel, we use Pro Tools. This is so like inside baseball audio talk. But and then for independent shows I work on, it's often Audition. And then I'm teaching an Audacity class at the local library like in 2 weeks from now, and I have to remind myself of the shortcuts. Like I know them, but my brain is just a mess of shortcuts is what I'm saying.
That's everybody though. Like the things we remember, like without thinking about it, I'm still astounded. I remember some things, like just who knew, right? Like
right.
Who
knew that this was in my brain?
There's so much in there, right? Like, and you're trying to fill it with more, because I think generally speaking, we're all curious people, and it doesn't matter if it's reading or podcasts or movies or television. Like, we're all curious, right? Like that's just the nature. And look, if you're listening to this show, thank you. But like, it's not, I know it's not for everybody. And I also know like podcasts aren't for everybody. Some people still enjoy their newspaper.
Of course.
In my head, I still want to be that newspaper with my coffee in the morning. Like I want that to be my life. It never will be. I don't.
It's like romanticized like.
Look, I'll be honest with you here. I've spent way too much time since this conversation was recorded thinking about the concept of inputs and outputs, specifically how it relates to us. And the more I think about it, the more I come to believe that a 50-50 split is wholly unrealistic. Because most of us consume things in a passive way on a level that is impossible to keep up with for creating something. And as an example, I sometimes listen to podcasts when I'm watching sports. That's 2 inputs happening simultaneously. Conversely, it would be really hard for me to output 2 things passively. In fact, I don't think I could output anything creatively in a passive way. So perhaps it should be adjusted for active inputs and active outputs. I'm actively reading this book. I'm actively going to write about it. 1 input, 1 output. Balance has been achieved. And as I've overthought this extensively, I think it should be an itemized balance sheet and not one based on time. I spent 12 hours reading that book, but only 2 hours drafting and published the review. The point is, I think all of us should be creatively balanced. And for some people, that means creating more. And for others, that means consuming more. And as a great example, we talked about journaling, which is a wonderful output and proof that not every creative output you have needs to be shared with the world, like my blog or this podcast. Some things just get to stay with you, and that's fine. So let me ask, in order to achieve creative balance, or even to just get it closer to 50-50, do you need to create more or consume more? And one last thing, what's stopping you? Thank you for listening to The Palmer Files, episode 38. And now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can tweet me at Agent Palmer, the show at The Palmer Files, or Rebecca at BeccaHope24. That's BeccaHope 24. You can visit Rebecca Hope Seidel, that's Seidel, for links and updates to all of her projects. Don't forget, you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com. And of course, email can be sent to the show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com if there's a topic or guest you'd like me to consider. Becca, do you have one final question for me?
Yeah, so I was talking before about how I've made it a point in my own life to journal every day, and I'm just making myself do it, kind of forcing a habit for myself. Is there a habit you wish you had that you don't have, but you wish you did?
Ooh, I'm trying to think. Habits are. I might take journaling. I might say writing on a daily basis. I've been doing a long, and I think I just wrote about. I just wrote about this. I think it will be out before this show airs.
Mm-hmm.
I have been doing a long, slow purge of just junk in my house by getting rid of 5 items every day or putting them away, whatever. It's my own little system. But like that's become a habit because I've been doing it for 2 years now. So that's kind of helped declutter the house. But you know, I think you know what, it's not really a habit. I just like to get better at my time management. Like Like I will read for longer than I should and stay up a little bit later.
Yeah.
Or I will, I don't know, play a video game for longer than I should. Like my time management is, I mean, I get a lot of stuff done, but I could get so much more done.
Yeah.
and I feel like it's probably just, I don't know what the habit is to get into. I just know my bad habit is my time management.
Yeah.
So if I could make that a good habit, I feel like that would be the optimal, because I would be well, imagine what else I could do.
Right. Exactly.
I don't know what else that is.
Yeah.
But
it's there somewhere.
Because the other thing is, over the last 2 years, I've made it a point to get into the habit of playing guitar on a more regular basis, which for me is like 3 times a week. Like that's a more regular basis.
Yeah.
I don't need to get I don't need to get proficient. I don't need to play live. I don't need to go to open mics. I just need to know that if I pick up the guitar, I can play.
Yeah. No, that's all right. That's
so I don't
output.
I don't know if that answers your question about habits, though.
I think it does.
Okay.